A few weeks back, I did a video on bow tuning myths that a lot of you guys are falling for. There were 3 of them, and it got a little heated. I knew it would. The comment section blew up. I did a podcast over on my show, the Let Off Podcast. The entire show was just responding to your guys' comments because there were so many, and that's awesome. It was so good that I'm going to do a second version here today. Part 2 of bow tuning myths that you are probably falling for. And if you aren't, good job. The first one is that spine indexing matters. So what is spine indexing? People who really get into the weeds on arrow building, and I do, believe me, if you've watched my channel, you know that I do. But people who really go deep into arrow building believe in something called spine indexing. Spine indexing is basically taking all your brand new arrow shafts and finding the weak line of your shafts. The way that arrows are made is they're a massive roll of carbon. It's like a really thin sheet of carbon that's rolled into a tube. And if you took a piece of paper and rolled it up, there would be a line at some point where the roll stops, right? And even though it's happening on such a small scale, you could never see it by looking at your shaft. That line exists somewhere on your arrows. Some people really believe that finding this line and fletching your arrows in a consistent way around this line makes a big difference. For example, some guys will make sure that that line is where the cock vein is and that cock vein is always out. There's a lot of different ideas that guys have about how to use this spine line. The way that people find this spine line is there's a few. The most common is to just fill your bathtub up with some water, pour all your arrow shafts in there, and you'll see that they bobble around and then they stop, and wherever they float, that direction that is out of the water and straight up is your spine line. I'm here to tell you that for our purposes as bow hunters, not target archers. I'm not a target archer. I want to make that very clear from the last video where someone was not happy that I didn't make that clear. I'm a bow hunter. It does not matter. There's not a chance in the world that in a bow hunting scenario, and honestly, probably in a target scenario, that fletching your arrows in line with the spine line will ever make an actual difference. In theory, it's a great thing to do because it removes one more variable. It's one more point of consistency that you can build into your arrows. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. If you want to spine index, it gives you that peace of mind. You want to remove that one more variable, absolutely do it. But I don't spine align any of my arrows, none that I build for myself or for anybody else. And I have as good of results with my shooting as I could ever hope for. I mean, we're always trying to get better, but that's not what's holding any of us back from perfection. So if you spine align your arrows, that's great. That's absolutely fine. And I love that you take pride in your setup. But don't let yourself believe that that is the reason your arrows are flying great or, whatever. Because there's a lot of other things that go into a successful arrow build that if you're at the point of spine aligning, you're probably doing all these other things too. But that's not the one, and there's maybe some other things we should spend our time thinking about and worrying about rather than that. That brings me to the second one, and it's not really a bow tuning myth, but it is something a lot of people do. And it's more of a subconscious thing that a lot of people have this subconscious idea that you can out-tune bad shooting. So when we talk about these things like we did in the last video, or we're doing this video with spine indexing and what I'll talk about next, there's a lot of people out there spending way more time worrying about this stuff and arguing about it on the internet than they are practicing their form, spending time on the range, practicing their mental game in archery, which I've done videos on. Mental game in archery is more important than anything, almost anything we do in the shop here. And there is just way too many people spending time worrying about this minute stuff that doesn't matter and not worrying about what they're giving to their setup and what they're putting into their shooting. So the myth is that you can out-tune bad shooting. And I know no one out there who's doing it thinks that they have bad shooting, but there's a lot of people, and I see them at shops who, are so into the weeds on this stuff and their hand form is incorrect. They take one shot and I can tell that their form is not great. And easy fixes, but it's things that you need to take into account for yourself and make your bow perfect. Absolutely, make your arrows perfect, but make yourself as perfect as you can too. Because the whole thing in archery is a system. Your bow, your arrows, yourself. It's a system. If we're putting all of this time and attention into these minute details, which may or may not matter, why wouldn't you take the time and put that effort into details which do matter, like your hand form, your mental game, consistent release, your foot position, shooting in different positions, sitting, kneeling, standing, awkward footing, etc. I could go on all day about things you should be practicing outside of the shop. That one is really important to me. And the third tuning myth, as promised, and I'm hesitant to get into this one, arrow clocking, everybody's favorite topic. Now, I haven't seen it talked about a ton lately, but there was a period where arrow clocking was the rage. For those who don't know, arrow clocking is the idea that your bow naturally, or your bowstring rather, naturally wants to push your arrow to the left or to the right, clockwise or counterclockwise, as it fires out of your bow. The reason for this natural turn comes down to the direction in which your serving is applied. Arrow clocking is complete nonsense. And if you don't shut off the video just because I said that, I'll tell you exactly why. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. First thing is that, how do we tell which way an arrow clocks? What you do is you take a bear shaft and you shoot at a target at close range, a range that wouldn't allow it to have a full rotation, so like 5 or 6 feet, and you'll be able to tell which way it has turned, slightly left or slightly right. Why do we do this with a bear shaft? Well, it's because as soon as you put vanes on an arrow, you wouldn't be able to tell which way it's clocking because your vanes are moving so much air, they immediately negate the effect of any arrow clocking. So that's one. Number two is the direction in which the serving is applied to the string comes down to the string builder, and that is what causes your arrows to clock left or right. Most string builders, and I'm a string builder myself, I got my whole setup over here, that's how I got started and all this stuff. Most string builders just have a way that they feel quicker and more efficient and better about serving, and particularly when you're doing the center serving, which is the most difficult serving on a bowstring or cable setup. There's one way that we like to go. I tend to go right to left. Other guys might go left to right. It just comes down to what you become used to as a string builder. If arrow clocking mattered, string builders know about it first, trust me, and they would all be serving their strings so that all arrows clocked right. They just would all be doing it. It's very easy to do, and we would all be doing it. But I serve better when I'm serving from right to left, so I don't care how that makes the arrows clock. Arrow clocking doesn't matter. I'm going to serve in the way that makes my serving the best that it can be. That's most comfortable for me, that gets the job done quickest and cleanest. So we always talk about arrow clocking in terms of left and right helicals, right? The whole point of this is that if your bow naturally wants to push an arrow to spin counterclockwise to the left, then we should put a left helical on to help it do that. And I completely understand the logic behind that. And if you're using glue-in points for target archery, 100% that is what you should be doing. But as bow hunters, everybody should be fletching with right helical, and I mean everybody. And everybody who's using single bevel broadheads should be using a right bevel broadhead. This is why at Tooth of the Air we only make right bevel broadheads. Because, and hear me out, all inserts are threaded to the right. Therefore, we should always want our arrows working in the direction that isn't going to want to loosen our broadheads. As soon as we have that arrow spinning in the opposite direction that your broadhead wants to be spun into your arrow, you have a point of failure or a point of weakness in the system. You have two things in the system that are now not working together. I want everything in my system working together. Now, a point right here about why arrow clocking doesn't matter is that if arrow clocking mattered, they would make broadheads that were threaded both left and right so that you could choose. But there's not a chance they're going to do that. It doesn't matter. If arrow clocking mattered, all string builders would ensure that their strings were going to clock an arrow to the right. If arrow clocking really matters to you, learn how to reserve your center serving and reserve it in a way that turns your arrows to the right so that you can shoot a right helical with a right bevel and have your right threaded insert all working together. There's just no reason for bow hunters to be shooting left helicals. It just doesn't make sense. If you're currently set up with left helical system, it's not the end of the world. It's not a problem. And it's going to work. You're going to have success. Your broadheads aren't going to fly off the end of your arrow. I promise you that. But in the future, think about what I'm saying here. I'm not saying tear down your arrows, but think about what I'm saying here when you go to build your next setup. Arrow clocking is something that I dread talking about because when it came onto the scene, it got talked about way too much, and it relates right back to the second myth in this video, which is that people spend way more time on this stuff that doesn't matter than their form. Half the people out there that are so worried about this stuff can't even shoot their bow worth a crap anyways. So I think we should be worrying more about that stuff. Again, as always, if you guys leave me a whole bunch of comments, I'll respond to them over on the Let Off podcast. I'll let you know in the comments which episode your comment will be responded to. And I appreciate it so much. Whether you agree or disagree, I'm always happy to talk. If you're rude, not so much. But be nice. Let's have open conversations. I love talking to you guys. I love making videos for you guys. Thank you so much for watching.